Agreeableness is a very difficult personality dimension to understand, I think, partly because it's difficult to dissociate from neuroticism and as well from extroversion. Because agreeable people like you, and so that kind of sounds like extroversion, and disagreeable people sound like they're hard to get along with, and they sort of are, but people who are high in neuroticism are hard to get along with too, and they tend to be volatile and irritable. And so most of the time, if you're engaged in a contentious issue with someone and emotions flare, it usually has more to do with trait neuroticism than with disagreeableness per se. So what I'm going to do is try to describe to you what the agreeable trait is on both of its dimensions, and also to lay out the pros and cons of existence on that normal distribution, trait normal distribution, at more or less every point. Because I think, the way I look at it anyways, is that of all the traits, agreeableness is the one that seems to come with the most marked positive and negative aspects, features, let's say, so we don't confuse it with aspects, the most positive and negative features at each point on the distribution. It's a very complex, seems to be a very, very complex dimension. So I'll read you some of the questions from the Big 5 aspect scale, and that'll give you kind of an initial rule of thumb estimate about whether or not you're agreeable or disagreeable. And so here are some of the questions. Imagine that you're answering these for yourself on a scale from 1 to 5, strongly disagree to strongly agree. So the first question is, am not interested in other people's problems. So if you are interested in other people's problems, that tilts you towards agreeableness, and I believe that's agreeableness is divided into compassion and politeness, which also sound like very positive things, right? Because everyone wants to be compassionate and everyone wants to be polite, and so you might say, well, is that a virtue? Are those virtues, with the other end being actually negative, to be not compassionate, not polite? It's certainly worded that way, and that's actually a mistake, because we know that these traits are normally distributed, roughly speaking, right? And that means that there has to be positive and negative features at every single position on the distribution. And so to make the presupposition, for example, that being extroverted is being better than being introverted, or that being emotionally stable is necessarily better than being neurotic, is to make a confusion of moral obligation with trait position. You have to assume that there's advantages and disadvantages all the way along, or the distribution wouldn't have set itself up that way, especially because these seem to be biologically instantiated traits. So anyways, if you're interested in other people's problems, they like to unburden themselves to you, you care about it. That's a mark of compassion. If you're more or less indifferent to other people's stupid problems and you wish they just get on with it, then you're less compassionate, you're harsher and more, well, at the extreme, more callous. Let's see. Respect authority. That's politeness. That's part of agreeableness. Rarely, let's see. Feel others' emotions. Compassion. Inquire about others' well-being. Compassion. Can't be bothered with others' needs. Take advantage of others. That's disagreeable, obviously. Sympathize with others' feelings. Avoid imposing my will on others. Wait for others to lead the way. Okay, I think all of those were associated with trait agreeableness or disagreeableness. So let's think about this for a minute. So I'm going to tell you how I conceptualize agreeableness. The first thing you want to know is that women are more agreeable than men, about half a standard deviation. And that's approximately enough so that if you took a random male and a random female out of the population and you tried to guess who was more agreeable and you guessed the female, you'd be right about 60% of the time. So, but what's interesting about that, and this is something also to keep in mind, is about normal distributions, you know. So imagine you have a normal distribution so that most people are in the middle, and then you have another normal distribution, male and female, and mostly they overlap. But you see out here and out here, they don't overlap at all. And so even though on average men and women aren't that much different in terms of their levels of agreeableness by the group, if you go out and you look at the extremes, they're very different. So all of the most agreeable people are women, and all of the most disagreeable people are men. And the thing is, the extremes are often what matter, rather than what's in the middle. And so one of the ways that's reflected in society, by the way, is there's way more men in prison. And the best personality predictor of being imprisoned is to be low in agreeableness. It makes you callous. Now you might think, well, what's the opposite of compassion and politeness? And the answer to that is, I think it's best sort of conceptualized as a trading game. So let's say that we're going to play repeated trading games. And if you're very agreeable, then you're going to bargain harder on my behalf than you're going to bargain on your own behalf. Whereas if you're very disagreeable, you're going to do the reverse. You're going to think, I'm in this trading game for me, and you're going to take care of your own interests. Where an agreeable person is going to say, no, at best this is, at worst this has to be 50-50, but I'd like to help you every way I can. Okay, now so you kind of understand that. Now the advantage to being agreeable then is that you're good in teams and you're very much likely to give other people credit. The downside of being agreeable is that you're not very good at putting forward your own interests. And so one of the things that predicts salary across time, for example, is agreeableness, and it predicts it negatively. And so it's part of the reason why women get paid less than men. And this is something for the women in the class to really listen to. Because how you get paid across time depends on a very large number of things, right? It depends on your skills and your abilities and your position and your social network and all of that. But the other thing it depends on is whether or not you actually go ask for money. Or maybe that you don't even ask. Because actually you don't ask for money. You tell people that you need to be paid more or something they don't like will happen. And I don't mean as a threat. I mean that you have to be willing, when you're negotiating, to have an alternative. You go talk to your boss who isn't going to give you money because everyone wants money, right? It's a competitive game. You're going to have to go there and say, look, here's what I do. Here's why it's useful. Here's why you have to give me more money. And this is my opportunities if you don't. And then you're not taking your boss's money anyways, because it's very frequently the case that he's working for a whopping big company. But he needs an excuse to give you money because everyone's asking for money all the time. And so you have to put your case forward powerfully and disagreeably. Now, you don't want to do it too disagreeably because then he's going to think that you're a son of a bitch and maybe he's not going to give you anything and maybe you'll get fired for being mouthy and all of that. And that certainly happens to people who are too disagreeable. You got to get the balance right, but it's definitely the case. And the other thing that happens to women that's also worth noting, and this is probably because they're higher in negative emotion, is they tend to underestimate their own utility in business settings, right? Because if you're trying to evaluate what you're like, and you're more tilted towards negative emotion, then the things that you do that are wrong are going to stand out more on the foreground than the things that you do that are right. So if you go into a negotiation and you're uncertain already because you have self-doubts, and then you're agreeable in the negotiation, what's going to happen is that you're not going to win as often. And winning in a business setting or in a career development setting means more opportunity for promotion and more revenue generated. Now, the downside of that, of course, is as you climb the business hierarchy is that you also have to take on more responsibility. And that responsibility is sometimes unpleasant as well, especially to people who are agreeable, because you're not necessarily liked if you're in a position of authority. And agreeable people really like to be liked. It's their primary motivator because they're concerned about the maintenance, I would say, of intimate, positive relationships. And that also makes them conflict avoidant.
What's the most misunderstood personality trait? If I had to bet, it's agreeableness. It sounds like a total virtue, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to be seen as compassionate, polite, and cooperative? But what if I told you that being too nice could be one of the biggest roadblocks in your career and your life? The psychologist Jordan Peterson argues that this very trait holds some of the most surprising and significant trade-offs in our behavior. It shapes our relationships, how we handle conflict, and yes, even how much money we make. To really get it, we need to stop thinking in simple terms like nice or mean, and start looking at the fascinating biology and psychology behind it all. In the Big Five personality model, agreeableness is all about how much you value social harmony. It breaks down into two key parts: compassion and politeness. Compassion is your empathy, your concern for others. Politeness is your respect for rules and social norms. Both sound great, the very ingredients for a civilized society. But Peterson points out a crucial fact: personality traits exist on a spectrum, And every single point on that spectrum, from extremely agreeable to extremely disagreeable, has its own set of pros and cons. This is where agreeableness gets so interesting. It blurs the line between being a good person and being a vulnerable one. We often make the mistake of seeing agreeableness as a measure of moral goodness. We think compassionate people are just better, and disagreeable people are difficult or selfish. But Peterson says this is the wrong way to look at it. Personality traits aren't about ethics, they're survival strategies. A highly agreeable person is amazing at building community and keeping the peace, but they often struggle to stand up for themselves, set boundaries, or face necessary conflict. On the flip side, a disagreeable person might seem harsh, but they often kill it in competitive fields, negotiations, and leadership roles. This creates a real tension in our world, which tells us to cooperate, but rewards those who assert themselves. Agreeable people shine in careers like nursing or teaching, while disagreeable people often climb the ladder in business and politics. The key to maturity is figuring out where you are on this spectrum and learning when to lean one way or the other. It's also easy to confuse agreeableness with other traits. For example, both highly neurotic people and highly disagreeable people can be hard to get along with, but for totally different reasons. A neurotic person is emotionally unstable, while a disagreeable person is strategically focused on their own goals. You might mistake someone's anxiety for them being cold or uncaring. This shows just how tricky it is to read people correctly. Evolutionary psychology gives us a clue about where this trait comes from. Compassion likely evolved to make sure we cared for our kids and maintained our social groups. This was especially critical for females, whose success depended on cooperation. This helps explain why, on average, women tend to score higher in agreeableness than men. Now, the average difference isn't huge, but when you look at the extremes, it's striking. Most of the super agreeable people are women, and most of the super disagreeable people are men. And this has massive social consequences. At its worst, extreme disagreeableness is linked to antisocial behavior, which helps explain why prisons are overwhelmingly male. But it's also linked to entrepreneurship and success. At the other extreme, excessive agreeableness leads to burnout, self-sacrifice, and an inability to say no, something you see all the time in caregivers and people-pleasers. Now, here's the part that really hits home for a lot of people: the financial cost of being agreeable. Study after study shows that agreeable people, especially women, earn less money. Why? Because they're less likely to negotiate for a raise or ask for a promotion. They undervalue what they bring to the table and will do anything to avoid a confrontation, terrified of looking aggressive or ungrateful. Peterson explains that this is a double whammy. They often have higher negative emotion, which fuels self-doubt, and society tends to judge assertive women more harshly than assertive men. It's a paradox. The very qualities that make you a wonderful co-worker can hold you back from getting ahead. In any negotiation, power isn't just about what you have, it's about your willingness to fight for it. Disagreeable people are just more comfortable with conflict. Their self-worth isn't tied to being liked, but for agreeable people, the fear of being disliked can feel like a genuine threat. So they give in, and they pay a literal price for it. Peterson's advice isn't to stop being nice. It's to develop what you might call adaptive disagreeableness, the ability to stand up for yourself without becoming a jerk. So, what does this all mean? Agreeableness shows us that even our best virtues can become weaknesses if we don't balance them. The world needs both agreeable people to hold things together and disagreeable people to push things forward. But for you personally, psychological health comes from balance. The world doesn't just reward you for being good, it rewards you for being competent and assertive. If you're a highly agreeable person, ask yourself, where am I giving too much? Where am I avoiding conflict just because I'm scared of rejection? Learning to be assertive doesn't mean you stop being kind. It means you start valuing yourself as much as you value everyone else. And if you're more disagreeable, maybe your challenge is to listen more and empathize. Your personality isn't your destiny, but being aware of it is a superpower. The world doesn't need more nice people or more tough people. It needs people who are both strong and kind. Thanks for watching. If this resonated with you, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more insights into how we tick.